AXSChat. We're really delighted to welcome Robert Neuhauser from Siemens today. Um, Both Antonio and I have previously, in our careers, worked for Siemens, and Siemens is still a big customer of our own employer. So we're closely interested in the work that Siemens are doing and how they work and so on, because it's close to our hearts. So Robert, we're delighted to have you with us today. Can you tell us a bit about your role and the work that you're doing within Siemens?
So actually, currently, I'm globally responsible for people and leadership, which in our case also includes all the topics around diversity and inclusion, because we think this is kind of an integral part. If we talk about people and leadership in the future, you obviously recognize immediately how important diversity and inclusion is in this whole package. Therefore, we combine all this together. Beyond that, I'm responsible for all the top talent development within Siemens, for the top placements within Siemens, for the top 300 functions, for all aspects of performance management, how we do this across Siemens, and also how we think and act about career development across Siemens globally.
Excellent. And we were saying off camera before, Antonio and I moved to Atos a number of years ago, but we've watched the change in Siemens as an organization and the change in people within Siemens and how people are dealt with real interest, because we were leaving a very structured, very rigid organization when we left, and it appears from the outside at least that that's changed really quite significantly, and there's a real focus on greater focus on diversity and everything else. And we had the real privilege to have Jürgen Meyer come and speak at our diversity expo in the summer in Atos in the UK. He gave a great speech about getting into the mindset of people and about understanding his own innate biases. He talked about out and actually being in the closet as an engineer, and how actually, if anything, he was overcompensating his biases because he was gay, and so was acting up even more so. So I think it was a really fascinating talk, and it was one of the first times I've heard a CEO, a real senior leader, talk quite so openly about their own experience and frailty. So that for me was a brilliant moment. I know you've been doing a lot of work around the topics of unconscious bias. Why is it so important for Siemens to eliminate this unconscious bias? What's the business impact of?
So first of all, before starting, I'd say that unconscious bias per se is not bad. Every one of us has it.
Sure.
It helps us to decide quickly sometimes, so it's not per se bad. But I'm happy that you mentioned the transition Siemens on, and also mentioning Jürgen, who is one of our role models, and we have quite a few of them in the meantime who are very open about talking about their experiences and the role of unconscious bias in what they experienced. Why so important for us? You mentioned Siemens is changing from being very structured hardware seller. We have become the second largest software company in Europe, which many people do not know actually, in terms of headcount, revenue, and things like that. And by this, we had to change, obviously, because the business is completely different. You have to take much faster decisions, but on the other hand, you also have to include much more different viewpoints on things. And so we invested quite heavily in helping our people to understand what unconscious bias can help them in terms of fast decision making, but on the other hand, sensibilizing them that sometimes making this fast decision might be exactly the wrong thing. And so it's kind of this interplay of being able to recognize where can I trust my biases because they are the summary of my experiences, basically. And where do I need to be extremely careful not to be fooled by my own unconscious biases? And this is so important in a fast-moving world as we are in now, to be able to make these distinctions consciously. And therefore, we put quite some effort in the whole topic of unconscious bias, which is also, by the way, understanding it and working on it consciously helps you to drive diverse organizations, obviously, because unconscious bias can be one of the biggest barriers to true diversity and inclusion.
Those are great and really important points, and I think if we extrapolate that from the decision-making process of people, we're also going into the age of algorithms.
Yes.
So the unconscious biases that we had, we called heuristics. These were the decision-making aids that we had previously. We're now digitizing those heuristics and also digitizing those biases. So understanding this is really of key importance if we want to be effective and take diversity and the benefits of diversity into our automated decision-making processes and be more effective, but also more equitable. I'm sure Debra's got a question. Yeah.
Actually, may I add something to this? Because I think you touched a very, very important point, the role of digitalization as a tool in avoiding unconscious bias or helping us in supporting decisions. And as most of us know, even second-order artificial intelligence doesn't help that much, because it actually, as you said, just learns from the experience that we have, and our past was not typically a past of diversity and inclusion. So if you train artificial intelligence by the past, it will make exactly the same mistakes that we might have made over the last 20 years. However, there are examples where digitalization can help us to overcome this. And because you mentioned our UK colleagues before, they run an experiment for hiring apprentices, and really based it on very simple digital behavioristic measurements. And the interesting outcome was, as soon as they started to implement this, the number of apprentices that got through the first level of interviews jumped from 16% to 32%, because suddenly we talked fact-based and not unconscious bias-based about a lot of things. So while we need to be very, very careful on the artificial intelligence and learning side that we do not reproduce our biases, on the other hand, digitalization can help us to get things structured, and by this way also more fair in some aspects.
Yeah, indeed, and I will let you talk soon, Debra. For instance, Microsoft, if you look into some of their products, what they're doing is they're not only enabling spell checking, but they're enabling in the proofing tools, you can turn on options that look for biased language.
Absolutely.
So then you can use automation and artificial intelligence to help remove bias, as well as it sort of creeping in there. So sorry, Debra, I just wanted to follow that.
No, that's a really good point. And I know, Robert, before we went on air, you were talking about the work that you are doing to really help your team understand the direction that Siemens wants to go in and why. And you were mentioning an engineering saying, yeah, okay, get it. We get it's good for Siemens. But tell me how it impacts what I'm trying to do. And I just thought that was such an important point, because the reality is, you told me to do it, you're my boss, but why should I as an individual care? And if we can get you to care and understand why this is going to make you a better engineer and you're going to be better at your job, I think not only is that successful for Siemens, but it's going to be successful for that engineer wherever they go. So I was just hoping you wouldn't mind going into that a little bit.
Yes, absolutely. This is really important and drives how we think about it, because it doesn't matter whether it doesn't matter for our engineers whether it's for Siemens, it's for them. And the question that we ask ourselves, how to sneak into the brains of these engineers so that they see, this is cool. And so the first thing that we realized was, engineers typically love to understand how things work. So we basically designed training concepts that were not about, look, we expect this from you now, and here you have to comply, but rather, can we talk about how your brain works? Because as soon as we got them at this point, they said, this is interesting. I love technology. I love science. I want to understand how my brain works. And we talked about not about, look, how you must make better decisions, but talk to them. Do you know how your brain takes decisions? So basically separating the person from its brain to some extent, so they can kind of relate to it as an artificial thing that they want to understand. And based on this, we designed trainings, and by this we got their interest. And then the whole training was not about, look, there's kind of a meta level on how you do this, but really, but if you understand how your brain works, you can take better decisions. And then suddenly people recognize, whoa, that's something that even helps me directly. And so this was kind of the idea on how to get into the brains of our people and really make them think what is in for me. And this is probably one of the most fascinating success stories I ever had in my career. So we put this in a very simple online training. And there are lots of debates on whether unconscious bias trainings work or not work, or how much they work. So we put it in a training and put it online and said, if you want to do this, you can do it, but we don't expect you to do it. And in the meantime, we are at 200,010 of our employees who did voluntarily this training, because people told them this is kind of interesting. Just do it. It's interesting. It's fun. Does it immediately change the whole culture? Obviously not. But it opened up their thinking and got it away from Siemens is telling you need to get more diverse to, oh, this is cool how my brain works. I like to take better decisions. And by this, now we can sneak in more things about, do you recognize how this influences, for example, your hiring decision? This is secondary. So that's kind of a cool thing I wanted to share, because we were completely surprised by how this worked.
Right.
It's a one in a lifetime thing. Yeah.
And that, I think that is so fascinating, because you talked a little bit about artificial intelligence and why should Siemens care? Well, you talked about how big Siemens is, and you're everywhere and you're growing. So of course we get that Siemens wants to get the best employees, but it's so fascinating too when you think about you're going to be building artificial intelligence, or you are building artificial intelligence. Yeah. So if I understand how my beautiful brain works and how other people's brains works, that's going to make me build better artificial intelligence. And so it is, I'm fascinated with why, beyond the obvious, and I don't know if you can even answer this, Robert, why does Siemens care about this? I'm so glad that you do, but why? Tell us why Siemens cares. Sorry. And then I'm going to be quiet.
No. This is a very, very fair question. And indeed, we talked quite a bit about the why also for Siemens. So why is it important for the individual? We just talked. Why so important for Siemens? The major change that we saw, and I think you and Neil addressed this, Siemens came from a very structured, nearly Tayloristic machinery. Actually, and there weren't so many decisions. You just had to work efficiently in your micro context. Now, as said, much of our growth business is in digital or digitally enabled businesses that have much faster decision process, but on the other hand are also global in a sense that, do I really understand in detail how this product will be used in India or somewhere else? How will it be used by people from different backgrounds? We just don't know. You can't run this out of a single location or a single mindset. You need to look at it from very different mindsets. And we can really correlate this. Whenever we have businesses where we are diverse, we are much better in digital offerings. In businesses that are very monocultural, we run into growth problems. And you see this if you have so many businesses as we do, you just see it. And this is basically where we have this, why we're doing it. That yes, we need to be careful not to tell our people that they were kind of stupid for 20 years and now they need to become diverse. Rather, there was a business of the past that was very structured. There it was not that important from a business point of view, from an ethical point of view. That's still as important as today. But from business, perhaps not that important. But no, there's no doubt that it's obvious that it basically is the driver for success going forward.
So,
Love
Robert,
that answer.
so we have been talking about the work that Siemens has been doing internally, but this is an area that you can't do it alone. You have partners, customers. How important is cooperation with other institutions and organizations in order to make real change in society?
It is important, and we do this on various levels. This starts from top-down messages from our CEO to those topics, participation in many initiatives, specifically on the LGBTI area, where we try to be very present. Whatever is possible in a specific region, we'll try to do this. Just supporting by being there and making clear that a company like Siemens that stands for quality, for reliability, is heavily investing in this. I think this is one part. Obviously, network to other organization helps. On the other hand, we should not overestimate the impact that you can have as a single company. You can contribute somewhat to this topic and interlink to other things, but obviously Siemens alone is just a contributor to change in society, but never be kind of the only driver.
Yeah, that's great.
And do you see yourself as also someone that can help partners and driving this as well?
We can talk about it. So I'm very open. Yeah. It helps talking about it and setting examples. You can help by exchanging what things were successful, what other things were successful in our company. So really driving things, and we do this globally. On the other hand, and that is also what I meant, you always have to respect and be careful in what the region and the respective culture you're talking to is able to accept at this very point in time. And this differs very much as we are a global company. The level of pushing things is completely different in the US compared to some other regions in the world. And this is always kind of a balance that you have to be aware of. There's no one size fits all globally for how to make this most effective.
That's great. We have a think tank within our organization. We call it the scientific community, and recently we published a paper, Journey 2022, and in that we were talking about tensions and inertia, and that's what you've got really when you have all of these different things at play with the different identities, national identities, culture, etc. So absolutely hear you, because in the area I work in, disability, even just the discussion of language can be fraught with difficulty. We were having a discussion today with all of these sort of international companies sat around the table, and I do believe that collectively we can make a difference. We can move the agenda forward. But people will go, well, which language do we use? Because different countries have different and in the end, someone said, I've decided on the Ostrich strategy, which is I'm going to stick my head in the sand consciously about language and just start doing stuff. And we've called it the Ostrich strategy. We're going to say we know that this is not going to be the right language for everyone, but we have an intention to do the right thing. So knowing that Siemens is active in the area of inclusion, you recently won the German Inclusion Prize, the Max Sport Prize. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, that was something we were very proud of, because indeed, for those people who don't know this price, it seems to be a German price, but if you're an international company, what you basically have to provide is what you do globally. And it's going really into details on basically the whole system on how you drive this. What people told us there, what they really liked and what set Siemens apart, at least in this competition, was that we made this very strong link to it has a business impact. We do this not just for fun or because it's the fashion of the decade, but because we strongly believe it has a fundamental impact on our business. And that was something where I was really proud of, because this was indeed beyond the thing that I just said before in terms of the how we do it, to basically how do we get into the minds of our people. Also really being a role model in putting it on the table. We don't do this just because it's fashionable or might be seen as fashionable, or because the public opinion might force us to do it, but because we believe that is essential for our growth and future at Siemens. And I was so happy that this was exactly the point that they pointed out, beyond all other things, that you do this systematically, blah, 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 all things you measure. But this was the thing that convinced us. And that was, but it was great. We loved it.
That's fantastic. And I think that there is this cultural mindset change that is required for future organizations to be successful. And the fact that you're concentrating rather than on the metrics, but on how people think about stuff is really a very important differentiator between leaders and followers. So I think that's hugely important. I know Antonio's also got another question around sort of management stuff, so I'm going to hand over to Antonio.
What I want to know, Robert, is going back to your career and to your experiences, and if you look back, can you tell how did your personal experience on inclusion reflect in your day-to-day activities that you are working on today?
It's such a big question. How do I answer this in short? In essence, perhaps for those who don't know me, I spent most of my life in different business functions, running large businesses for Siemens, serving as a CEO, ran large crisis project, did an R&D, come from a science background, actually, was responsible for high-tech Chinese-German joint venture. So what do I get from there? I think one of the things is I learned that everyone has strong unconscious biases, and they can hinder discussion massively. So understanding quickly what kind of biases do you have, what kind of biases do I have, how can we get around them to find solutions, was one thing that I really learned. And you learn it the hard way in the early times of your career. Later on, you realize what's happening and get more open to it and more effective and efficient. That was one thing. The other thing was a colleague of mine always says, nothing changes perspectives like changing perspectives. And I think this is very true. So having worked on different sides on things, just immediately get kind of a control mechanism on your unconscious biases in terms of, oh yeah, this is how I think currently. If I would be there, I would have probably different experience. So if you're able to change perspectives in your career, you're much more likely to be able to quickly recognize your own biases and other people's biases, and helps to work effectively, which is also something I advise all my mentees that are asking for career advice. The most important thing you can do is change perspective as often as you can, because this helps you in a world that is more and more interconnected and collaborative. This was probably now from the big thing, just one small part, but
No, it's a great answer, though. It's a great answer. Robert, just for a second, I assume everybody knows what we're talking about when we're talking about unconscious bias, but just in case somebody's watching and they're curious what we're meaning, can you give a couple of examples of unconscious bias?
yes, I'll try to. Yeah. So science has distinguished many different kinds of unconscious bias. Basically, unconscious bias means I make a shortcut in my brain, putting a situation or people into a box and say, I'm not looking at the situation or the person. I just say, oh, you're kind of this box, and typically this box has this and this attributes. So this is unconscious bias, and you can think of nearly everything of it. It can be, take me as an example. I'm a German male. Yeah. So you would say, German male. Probably he's quite reasonable, quality oriented, probably on time. That are automatically those kind of biases that you might have with me. Perhaps you might also have negative ones, but I don't want to go into those. That would be unconscious bias. Another unconscious bias is related to age. Yeah? Some people have a strong unconscious bias in terms of people that are older are not as innovative.
Right. Good one. Good one.
Sometimes this is true, sometimes it's not true. It's an unconscious bias. Be careful not to put people in a box and just say, I don't look at you, I look at the box. And the same things, by the way, happens also to decision making, not only people related, but also situation related. Yeah, this is the typical situation of X. I know it. Sometimes, yes, you have experience, so the bias is to decide like this, but sometimes you need to look closer. Perhaps it's not the situation that is fitting this box. So this is about unconscious bias, and you'll find it everywhere. Age, religions, nationalities, gender, beliefs, whatever you can afford the box around it.
That kind of stereotyping, but it's not even conscious stereotyping, it just happens, right? Yes. I'm very interested in one of the ones that you mentioned, because age is a really pressing issue. So there are two really significant megatrends that are interrelated, and those are age and disability, because as we age, we're likely to acquire disability. So Debra, Antonio, and I are constantly talking about this, but Germany is one of the most rapidly aging populations in Europe. Mm-hmm. So this must be changing the attitude. The workforces are going to get older. They're going to continue to get older. We're going to have to relearn and learn new skills and acquire new skills as we age and continue to work. And our attitudes to work are also going to have to change. So how do we sort of tackle the issue? Because aging is one of those things where I think the bias is quite deeply entrenched. Because even what we're seeing in the tech industry is this, the bias towards youth is very strong. It's like, oh yeah, let's employ lots of young people because they're going to have some great ideas. It's like, well, yeah, but what about the experience? What about the knowledge of how stuff works? It doesn't have to be just technology. So how do we address that? And what are the benefits of actually encouraging people who are older to stay in tech and get back into tech? And how can that benefit organizations like Siemens?
Yeah, I think very, very valid question. I'd like to address a couple of different things.
Sure.
First of all, for Siemens, this is not a new challenge. We are a company that has basically 5 generations working within the company. And indeed, I have quite a few talks and discussions with my colleagues from Google, from other tech companies that basically now start asking us that you guys have 5 generations of workforce in your company. Yeah. You seem to be successful. We have only basically 1.5 generations of workforce. We know that we are running into a similar structure as you have. What are you doing to be still successful? Because our mindset is you probably get not successful as you have a distributed workforce across age. So they get quite interested and ask interesting enough. They ask us for some advice as we do on some other things on that one. I think now jumping into what you can do. The first is obviously on the cognitive stuff and the learning stuff, just provide the opportunity for lifelong learning also within the company and really support this. So Siemens currently spends round about 600 million a year in learning activities, 600 million euro a year in learning activities. Because in most of our businesses, we know that the half-time of knowledge is so fast that we permanently need to retrain our people. So this is just addressing the kind of training skills topic. The other part is obviously over time, now very specific, over time, the aspirations are changing. Sometimes people have times where they love to push for careers, and there are other times where it's not about career. I want to optimize now work-life balance. And we see, by the way, more and more that's not early talents for career, later stages for life balance is kind of like this. Yeah. So being able to offer very flexible models on this helps enormously. And I think there are few companies out there that offer that broad range of flexibility, from the traditional sabbaticals to all kind of working models. You can imagine nearly everyone in Siemens probably has everyone that you can imagine. So that are also things that are important. So supporting on training, supporting on flexibility, helping people who need to help others. Sometimes they need to have time off. That are exactly the things that you can contribute.
Definitely, carers' responsibilities are a big factor in people wanting flexible working. And Atos is also an organisation that's got 5 generations. We've got a very similar profile, unsurprisingly, because of our heritage. So yeah, we face those same challenges and find that flexibility is really important. Thank you so much. It's been a really fascinating chat. We've reached the end of our allotted time. I need to thank Barclays and MyClearText for their support to keep us running over 4 years now. Once again, thank you very much, Robert. It's been a real pleasure talking to you.
It was my pleasure. Thanks.
Thank you.